How to stay sane during the pandemic. Is the pandemic wearing you out? Have you tried to get rid of it in your head already, but you're struggling to get better in your emotional balance? It happens to all of us right now, and it can become a downward cycle. But here you are today. If you want to disaster-proof your brain, you are at the right stage. Look no further, because we have designed this LinkedIn live session to disaster-proof your brain, to bounce back from the pandemic, and you are able to manage yourself at a much, much higher level. So allow me to introduce myself to you for just a quick while. My name is Andreas. I'm a Certified NLP Trainer running a company here in Malaysia since about 2006. Living in Malaysia, loving the country since 1993. Love the country, love the people. Hey, love the food, of course, And in this LinkedIn live session that you are going to experience, I'm going to introduce someone to you who really has some foolproof ways to manage your brain at a higher level. All right. Okay, the Mind Mastery Show, resilience and recovery from the pandemic today. You'll learn 3 key techniques to stay resilient in any crisis, learn how to respond to pandemics with patterns of chronicity, recovery, resilience, and Richard is going to share with you a little bit about the NLP change process. But before we really get started, allow me to look at the audience. I'm appreciating you all being here today. I would like to introduce yourself to Richard. Okay, Richard trains NLP practitioners in America, Europe, Asia, and Australasia. He has written 13 books about NLP, and his books are translated in 8 different languages. He won many international awards. And some award judges commented that his nomination stood out because he has made being an international trainer in many parts of the world. His book, Transforming Communication, is a core text, and hey, listen to this one, okay? In several top New Zealand business universities. Sorry, I'm blabbering a bit. Okay. And he's also training, appropriate to this time right now, we are in the Olympics, he's training business and sports people and athletes in New Zealand. Watch his video. I think it's a very nice video. So I guess we are all ready to see the man Let's welcome him, welcome him, welcome him. I'll bring him on stage. There he is. Okay, let me put him to the right side maybe. Okay, there he is. Welcome, Richard. Welcome, Richard. Good to see you here. Let's talk about resilience today and what it takes to become resilient, okay? That's the topic we are waiting for. Everybody talks about resilience. Now we can Google it up, but in your mind, in your mind and your expertise, how do you define resilience, Richard? How do you define resilience? What is resilience?
Okay, firstly, thank you very much, Andreas, for organizing this event. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And so the question was, how do I define resilience? And most people think of resilience as being bouncing back from a challenge. So there's something unexpected, something unpleasant happens, and they bounce back. And for my work, I want to define it much bigger than that, and to think of resilience as being not just the ability to bounce back from a crisis, but to understand that life brings crises, and that resilience is the ability to actually continue learning and developing. You came into this world through birth, that was a crisis, and you grew from that. You didn't think, well, that was a terrible thing and I only just survived it. You actually grew and improved as a result of that and many, many other crises. And so what I want to do this afternoon, or whichever part of the day it is where you are, is show you how to continue growing through these kind of crises, including this international pandemic.
Share with me, Richard, how did you get started in the work on resilience overall? What is your experience around this one? Share a little bit.
Sure. Well, firstly, I live in New Zealand, and so I live with my wife Yulia here, and I have other family in New Zealand. And New Zealand actually hasn't really been experiencing the pandemic the same as most parts of the world. It's been a relatively safe place here. But I began training around 45 years ago, and I actually began training in this field in the early 1990s. And what happened was I had a friend who was over in Sarajevo, and the war was just kind of winding down in Sarajevo and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And she said, look, we've got lots of doctors over here, psychiatrists, they're working with people, and they don't know how to do this. They've got no money, and they don't know how to manage all these people. There's a whole city of people who are traumatized. And so I had trained in working in this way. I trained as a psychotherapist, I trained as a teacher. So I went over to Sarajevo, and that was the first place where I taught these things.
Okay, all right, okay. I'm looking at the screen, the other screen. I lost you for a moment. What was your main takeaway from that experience, Richard? From that overall experience?
Well, I think the most powerful thing that I learned, and I knew this in theory before, but what I really learned in Sarajevo is that it's not what happens to you, it's how your brain processes what happens to you that makes the difference. So let me give you an example. I worked with a guy there, he was a psychiatrist, and he said he had a traumatic event and it wasn't actually the war. Could we work with that? So I said, okay, let's do that. And he told me that when he was 18 years old, he went out on his first date with a young woman. So they met in the beautiful old city in Sarajevo. And she said to him casually, I've got something to show you. And she reached into her shirt, into her blouse, and she brought out a little pet mouse. And he didn't expect her to have a mouse hidden in her pocket there, so he kind of jumped. And then he thought, oh my goodness, this is humiliating. You know, I've disgraced myself in front of her. And he turned and he ran away. And he never saw her again. He never spoke to her again. But the saddest thing, perhaps even sadder than that, is that he developed a sort of a traumatic response. Luckily not to women, because that would be very challenging in life. But he developed a response to mice. And he was so afraid of mice that when the bombs were landing in the war, he could not go down into a safe cellar underneath one of the houses. They had to go immediately, of course. And he could not go down there because he was so frightened of mice. He would rather die than see this little mouse, which in the case of this story, of course, had never hurt him. It was an innocent pet. And what that tells you is that it's not about how dangerous the mouse is. I mean, the mouse was nothing. The war was very, very dangerous. It's about how your brain is coding this experience.
All right. Okay. So how it's coding this experience. So what specifically do you mean by that? Because hey, sometimes, I mean, I do know a little bit as well, of course, around this one. When something is happening, certain people can recover very, very easily from something. You told us, you shared the story right now of the guy going out with his girlfriend and she brought out a mice, which would have shocked everybody, I believe. Okay, you expect something different, and she brought a mice out of her blouse. Who you? Some people would have laughed that stuff away. Some people would have said, like, what the heck is going on here? He got traumatized. So what really is happening inside here that this causes such a dramatic impact?
Okay, well, the first thing to understand, I think, about this is that nothing is broken when he has this. He had a kind of a panic attack, I guess you'd say. Nothing is actually broken. And what's happened is when he sees this experience in his brain, this memory is stored, like all new memories, in what's called the hippocampus. That's this green piece here inside the brain. And next to the hippocampus is this area here called the amygdala in English. And the amygdala is a kind of an alert center. So it tells you, is this important? Because not everything that happens in life is worth making a fantastic memory of, and some things are more important than others. So if it decides that it's important, then it's going to make this memory really strong. And in this case, of course, the memory was kind of scary, and his brain coded it as really important here. And then of course, what happened is that his brain changes that memory in certain ways. It makes it come closer to him so that he sees it as something big that's right in front of him. You know, if something's right in front of you, then it seems like it's more important. So his brain is trying to protect him. It's trying to make sure that if ever he gets into this situation again, he can be safe. Now, it's not just that it was painful, like you might bump yourself or cut yourself or something and that hurts. This didn't hurt, remember. What's most distressing about these events is usually that the person feels out of control. They feel like they can't do anything about it, and that's what the amygdala is looking for, to get you out of situations where you couldn't control what was happening, because you may, of course, it's thinking you may die. So it's trying to look after you at that time, and it's going to code this experience so it's strong enough so that you will never go back to that kind of situation. Well, usually what happens is while you sleep at night, your brain moves the memory from the temporary storage areas in the center. It moves it out to the cortex outside here. And as you sleep, it recodes it. It reconsolidates it, we say. And in his case, of course, it didn't really recode it very well. It didn't think, well, hang on, that was pretty safe. That was just a mouse. Instead, what it did is it kept the original traumatic coding for that event. So what I mean by that coding is that it's strong, it's the picture is big, the sounds are loud. And by the way, he's remembering one tiny little piece. He's not remembering that he had this wonderful friendship with this young woman. He's not remembering that afterwards, as soon as he moved away, he was completely away from the mouse and completely safe. And that's another part of coding. You see that when someone is traumatized by an event, they keep thinking about one little part of the event. They don't realize it's part of a bigger story where they're safe.
So would you, hold on, I gotta move back. Would you say that, I mean, isn't that a normal thing? So when we are shocked in certain situations, that we are all having a fight or flight response, actually. So how can you identify someone? I mean, some people react stronger to it, as you just mentioned. Some people can easily move on and forget about it altogether overall. So how can you predict a person, how do they react to it, and what can we do about it?
Okay, now the great thing is that we live in a world where there's been a lot of research about how this happens more successfully and less successfully. So when we study people who are going through crisis situations and dramatic crises, you know, I work in places where there's been a war, tsunami, earthquake, something pretty dramatic often. And what we find is that there are some things that predict whether the person will recover and bounce back and be resilient, or on the other hand, where things will not only not recover, but they'll actually get worse. We call that chronicity, which means a long time. Chronos means time. So chronicity means something that lasts for a long time. And when someone has a long time traumatic response to something, it doesn't only not get better, it actually gets gradually worse usually. And that tells us that the way that they are thinking about it is building the original unpleasant experience instead of reorganizing it in a way that's more useful and has more learnings for them. So what determines that difference is a lot of things that happen inside the head, but some things that don't happen inside the head. Some things are not your fault. And the first thing that doesn't happen inside your head that you need to know about resilience, the number one thing in research that makes people resilient is other human beings. Like right now, we're talking together, and wherever you are across the world, it's very important for you to know, I'm actually here. I'm another human being. And I actually am telling you these things because I actually care about you. And that feeling that we have friends, that we have people who care about us is the number one thing that makes the difference between resilient and not resilient. So that changes from culture to culture. Some cultures, people automatically get that feeling more. Some cultures are a little more difficult to get that feeling in. So that's the very first thing, is friends make a difference. And the next thing, of course, is that sometimes people have had bad experiences in the past. So when I'm teaching resilience, I don't want to just teach people, here's how you respond from now, but also how to reconsolidate memories that might have happened years ago, because those are important predictors of what will happen now. So it's not all in your head right now. Some of it's about your friends, some of it's about your past, and to heal the past is another thing that I think it's important for people to learn. And I know, Andreas, that's something that you teach people to be able to do as well.
Let me interrupt you rudely. Oops. Hold on. Where are you right now? I lost you. Okay, here you go again. Can happen. Okay, I moved you onto the wrong side right now. Let me ask you, what do we do when you mention, okay, we need to connect with friends right now? And right now we are, okay, New Zealand is blessed that COVID numbers are really, really low at that point in your place. In Malaysia, the numbers are rapidly increasing, and people are really scared right now to meet people, to connect with people. Like when I go down in my condominium area, there's a little garden or a little area where I'm like to do my jogging part. People use the same pathway, but they start to avoid each other. So taking big circles around or try to stay alone. What would be the impact of that one long term? Can you share something on this one with us?
Yeah, that's very important, because you can hear these things the first day. You don't really notice that. So it's just, oh, well, we're just being careful. But your brain isn't designed for avoiding other people. And when people avoid you, it's a very, very powerful message. Our brain evolved over a long time of wanting to know that other people care about us. So that means we need to actually be careful. It seems like rationally, oh, I know why they're doing that. They're avoiding me because, we need to be careful about the virus. But actually, in terms of the way your brain is built, it doesn't know that. Your unconscious mind, your unconscious brain is responding as if there must be something wrong, something really wrong, because people are avoiding me. So that's why it's so important to have times like this where we're meeting with people, smiling at each other, and letting each other know that we're still part of humanity and we still care about each other. It's important to remember those things. And that's the same, with, I mentioned that when things get recoded in the brain, that happens during sleep. And again, this is something that at first you wouldn't notice it. If you have a few sleepless nights, you're worrying, or what will happen? Am I going to lose money? What's going on with the economy? All those kind of things that have been worrying us over the last year and a half, of course. At first, seems like, okay, well, of course I'm worried. I just need to think. It's also important to understand that to be resilient, you need sleep. It's only during sleep and during real stillness, like meditation processes, deep prayer, those are the only times when your brain can actually move these memories out and reorganize them and make sense of them. So those times of stillness, of sleep, are very, very important. So that's another thing I'd want to say is sleep, and making sure that you have times when you smile at other people, when you connect with people, even if it's like this over the internet. Those are really, really important.
You just took one question from me already. Okay, the question was like, does it work over the internet? Because we want to meet people, we want to hug people, we want to touch people. That's one thing. Does Zoom meetings actually work? I think the beautiful part of working with Zoom meetings right now is that I'm able, for example, to connect with you. I can connect with people in America or with different people that I normally wouldn't have thought about connecting. So that's one possibility. But still, I can't reach out and touch the people. Okay, we are doing something like give me a virtual hug and all that stuff. But is that really a substitute for this one? First one. Second question.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question would be sleep. You mentioned. Do we need to sleep? How many hours would we need to sleep? And I do know there's sleep research going on. It doesn't matter how long we sleep, when we sleep? And also third one, just leading in there, what happened to children? Little kiddos who are like in the imprint period, below 6 years old, 3 years old or whatever. How do they cope with the overall situation?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. So the first thing about connecting over the internet is good, and you're right that your body expects to be hugged as well. And by the way, actually, you're allowed to self-soothe as well. You're allowed to actually hug yourself, and it does actually have an effect in the brain. I know you consciously you'd think, well, this is just nuts. I'm just kind of reassuring myself. How can that work? But your brain doesn't know the difference. It's like laughing, If I laugh and I pretend to laugh, my brain doesn't know the difference. It's designed to understand that when I'm laughing, I'm enjoying myself. So reassuring yourself is really important as well. Now, with children, of course, that becomes even more important because they don't have as much ability to consciously step back from this and think, wait a moment, actually we're all safe here. So people are behaving weird, but rationally we're safe. So that means that we need to pay more attention to that, to their ability to kind of soothe themselves, to get reassurance physically from us, and also to make sure that they understand that sleep is really, really precious. During sleep, your brain is making sense of the world. It's not just turning off, it's actually doing important things over that time of sleep. So those things are kind of the background of this other thing that I'm teaching people, of course, which is how to manage your thoughts. If you're lying there trying to get to sleep, how to manage your thoughts so you can actually think something that's useful.
Give me a moment before you say that. Let me just play out basically that there's a slide where people can start connecting with you as well, if that works. Yeah. I don't think I have it correctly. Oh, yes, I have it correctly. I see that. Okay. I hope that moves along. I have a before we continue before we continue, I'm going to check. We have a couple of questions. I think at least one good question. We have a couple of questions, and all questions are good in the first place, okay? But I read a question by Robin, who said, I view resilience as a process of accepting, adapting, and advancing from a traumatic experience. But in the process, sometimes there are trigger points that bring back bitter memories of that experience, and we tend to regress a bit. So how do we reprogram our brain to overcome these trigger points? And I think it's something you just wanted to add in as well. Before you answer this question, Richard, I want to just do a shout out, check out who else is in the room right now, because we want to welcome those. Okay, we got quite a high number of viewers here right now. So Robin is here, Rafsan is here. I'm just flipping through, and I hope I don't ignore people. My apologies if I ignore your name. Wansen is here, Robin, Rizal, Tila is here, Afsan, Jane is here, Pauline, Kan Longtang is here, Keal is here, Julius is here, Marisa is here, Jeffrey is here, Dr. Majeri is here, Omar is here, I mentioned before, Hassan is here, my darling wife is here, yeah, Nachwa, okay, Rocky is in the house, Michelle is in the house, Melanie, we've got Casey in the house, Wilson, Manmeet, okay, Ruby, and I hope I got you all along that line. If you are live, do me a favor, if you are live watching this show, hashtag live. If you are watching that video as a replay, type in hashtag replay as well. So we do know who's really, really here. It's just for me to know at a later stage. And who's watching at a later stage as well. So hashtag if you are live, hashtag live. And if you're watching the replay at a later time, type in hashtag replay. All right, Richard, so back to you. the question really was from, do you still remember the question? Of course you still remember.
I kind of do, yeah.
Okay, over to you back again, all right? And people appreciate your sharing overall. They're really, really, really happy. I got good stuff here. Loving it. Great question, great session overall. So I hope that helps you as well to feel good about sharing this with us here and spending your time with us, because for Richard, it's already in the evening time. I think it's about 7:30 maybe, or 7 o'clock around, okay? So yes, all right, okay, over to you answering the question.
Yeah, so this question was about, there are going to be events that trigger the unpleasant part of those memories. And the more you understand about how this is happening, the more you are able to actually do something that's useful at those moments. The first thing to understand is that when your brain remembers something unpleasant and it feels bad, there's nothing broken. And we've said that a few times now. It's a really important thing to re-emphasize. There's nothing broken. Your brain is designed to protect you. And when it gets that kind of fight or flight feeling, that heart-pounding feeling, it's doing what it's designed to do. It loves you, it's protecting you. And it simply doesn't understand that that's only part of the story here. So the unpleasant trigger events that we're talking about here, like that man seeing the mouse when I mentioned that story, those little trigger events are part of a larger story. And so the first thing that I would emphasize is the real importance of realizing, okay, this is part of a larger story. I've had crises before, like my birth, perhaps the first time you went to school. There are lots of other things like this that have been challenges in your life that you've actually grown through. And you have learned from those experiences. So looking for the learnings is a really, really important part of how to respond to that. What can I learn about this? Now, I said that what's most disturbing about traumatic events is not physical pain and things like that. It's the feeling of being out of control. And that's how come it feels so bad when you remember the time when that was building up. So it was building. That sense of being out of control was getting stronger. And this, at that moment, of course, the person feels like, I'm going to completely be out of control. I'm going to die, whatever it is. And that's why it feels so bad. It's not the physical unpleasantness of what's happening that's awful. It's actually the feeling that you are out of control. So anything that you can do at that moment that reminds you you do have control over something, little things like what you're going to do in the next 5 minutes, how slowly you're breathing, what things you pay attention to in your memories, those tiny little things that you have control of, that's what I'm calling goals, not these big, I'm going to, change the world and stuff like that. But these little things, feeling like you're in control, is a really, really important part of resilience.
Let me interrupt you a little bit, if I may. Being in control, how do I do this, okay? You mentioned the my story earlier, so suddenly the emotion comes up overall. And I think it's different between a my story when suddenly something really happened, an emergency like maybe an earthquake, as you experienced in Christchurch, I believe, compared to now the invisible enemy, COVID overall. So how do I create simple goals, and how do I get the feeling I'm in control actually when I feel like out of control?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to understand is that there are always some things that I cannot control. So I cannot control what world leaders are doing right now. I can't immediately control what they're doing about the pandemic. I don't have some kind of magic control over who gets this virus in other places and so on. And of course, what happens when someone pays attention always to those things that are out of their control is it feels more and more unpleasant. So what I'm saying is acknowledging those things. There are always things out of your control. We're born. Eventually, so far, it's been very common that people die eventually. So there are definitely things out of my control. And what is empowering, what gives people a sense of resilience is knowing that and being able to think, okay, what can I control? When I went back into Christchurch, my home city, immediately after the earthquake there, and my mother was there at the time, and everything in her house was smashed. The earthquake had just shaken the entire house. Everything had come out of the cupboards and was smashed. And she had no electricity. She had no water supply, all of those things were gone. And what was remarkable to me was to see her actually. She got the broom, and she had actually, by the time I got to her house, she had actually tidied up all of this rubbish there. Now, it didn't actually matter. She said, "Oh, I wanted to make sure it was all tidy for you." It really didn't matter. But what was important about it was she had found something that she could control. She could get a broom, she could sweep, and it didn't fix her house. The walls were cracked in places, things like that. It didn't fix that, but she fixed the thing that she could be in control of. So resilient people, actually, they focus on, okay, I don't have to fix everything and do all the usual things I do, but here, what is one thing that I can actually manage? I'm sure you've heard that, the courage to change the things that I can change, and the ability to let go of those things that I can't change, and of course the wisdom to know the difference.
So is it really about, okay, something is happening and then really kind of like creating an own inner trigger of saying like, I hold myself onto a table, I do a coffee for me right now, I take the coffee, sit down and drink quietly and just focus on a moment by moment basis on the taste of the coffee, and then I take the cup. So step by step, sequential, really starting to take control over the little things, and then until my mind, my brain, my emotional state goes back to a normal kind of situation. Is it like that?
It's literally like that. And what's amazing is that at the time when someone is in a panic state, it's hard to believe that just thinking about something different will make that much difference, because panic feels physical. It feels like I'm going to die, like my heart is going to explode, something like that. I get that. And if you're in the pandemic, then this feeling in the background that something's wrong, I don't know what it is, but something really bad has happened. And understanding that feeling, that physical feeling, actually comes from what we think about. The way that I usually explain it to people is it comes from the questions that you're asking yourself. Now, people who it gets worse and worse, they ask two really unhelpful questions, and they ask them again and again. You want to know? Those two questions. The first one is why?
Why?
Why did this happen? Now, I know it's a really interesting idea. And of course, when the person asks why, they're trying to find meaning. Why, what does it mean?
Why is it happening to me, or why is it happening overall? Because many people say like, why is it happening to me?
Yeah.
Both.
Why is it happening to me? And then why is it happening? Is this an evil plot? those kind of questions, though, of course, people are trying to find meaning, but asking why it happened in the past doesn't actually give you useful meanings. The more useful meanings come from thinking, what can I do right now? That's what gives life meaning, not why did it happen. Now, the other question that people ask that's really unhelpful, the second one, is what if horrible, horrible things happen? You can't control the world. This is the way life is. Sometimes things that you didn't want to happen will happen, that's true. But people who enjoy their life do not spend their time thinking, what if horrible things happen? What if I die? What if my family dies? What if this? What if that? It's possible to think about that forever and not come up with a really smart answer. And so the people who are being successful are not asking those questions. They're working out, what can I do? And you can hear how that's different. What can I do? And what can I do that would be useful, that will make sense of this to me in the future as time goes on, rather than in the past.
Okay, we've got some people here. Somebody wants to know how old you are, and she's asking in a very interesting manner, okay? She's asking how many recessions that you have been a part of within your life. For example, 1997, 2012, for example, during that time, more important most likely, during that time, what tools that make you sane during this kind of recession? Recession also happened during this pandemic. So what kind of tools? So how many have you experienced? And most likely as well, if you have experienced these out of control outer experiences, you're building your own inner way of being able to manage it most likely as well a little bit better. So you know what to say about this question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So of course, I'm in my late 60s, And that means that I've seen a lot of things happening in the world, but in particular, I have made a point of going over to teach in places where there are fairly dramatic things happening. In the Caucasus, in the area around Chechnya, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Egypt, in the times after the revolution and the other events there, in these places where there have been tsunami, where there have been whole towns and cities swept away in North Japan, in the Pacific Islands, where these tsunamis have destroyed whole areas. So I have seen quite a lot of those kind of things. But like any human being, I've also had other crises in my life. I had, I mentioned before, I live with my wonderful wife and we teach together and so on. And, 20 years ago, my previous wife actually died at that time. That's statistically one of the most dramatic things that an individual goes through, is having their life partner die. And I needed to work out, how do I make sense of this? Rather than asking, why did this happen? What did I do wrong? That kind of thing. Or rather than asking, what if this happens again? How can I ever love again? How can I ever trust life again? Because the things that got me out of this, out of feeling absolutely horrible, and it was a very challenging time for me, the things that got me out of it, though, were thinking, what have I learned about life? And you know what? I learned there is nothing more precious than love. There's absolutely nothing more precious than love. And it's always available. The world is full of opportunities to create this connection with other human beings. Now, I could have told you that before, and it would have been an interesting theory, but I tell you it now, and I feel it in every cell in my body. And that's what I learned from that crisis.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, I think we all got to give Richard some love for this openness. And I'm sorry to hear about your wife passing on, your first wife, of course. Overall, it's so very sad to hear that along that line. Thank you for your openness and for your real honest sharing. And I realize it comes from the heart. So some people are you ready for some more questions? People start to warm up, okay, to you apparently, okay? So we have here a question. What can I learn from a phobia? What can I actually learn from a phobia? Let's start with this one first, and then we continue with more questions coming next, okay?
Okay, that's so the question about a phobia. Of course, if you were here when I was telling the story about that little mouse, that's quite a good example of that, because what happened with this guy is he had a phobia of mice as a result of simply seeing a mouse in an unexpected situation, with his girlfriend bringing it out of her pocket, and he didn't expect this. He jumped back, and then he got really frightened, and then his body had this uncontrollable response. And what's important to know is that, once again, there is nothing broken when you have a phobia. What it tells you is that your brain is designed, most of all, to keep you alive. It loves you, and it's trying to do the very best it can to keep you alive. But you don't have to settle for its first instinctive response. So there are ways to deal with that. And the secret is to find someone who understands these things. That Andreas and I are both actually teachers of these processes, like what we would call trauma recovery processes. So that's another thing I do, is I work with people who are doing research on how to help people recover quickly in one session, in a half-an-hour process, from dramatic events like that. So we have research now with hundreds and hundreds of people. This is medical research. It's very, very systematic. It's been done in the United States and in other countries, with men, with women, with group after group, person after person doing it. And the process that I'm talking about is called RTM. It's called Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories. And it's based on a very core NLP process. So NLP is this field that both Andreas and I are working in. So my recommendation is find someone who knows how to do that process really well to take you through that process. And what to learn from the phobia is your brain loves you, and it will do whatever it takes to keep you alive. It truly will.
All right, wonderful. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question of what can somebody do even if they don't know NLP in a moment. My friend Annalisa is asking, okay, and I think it's a very important question. Sometimes we don't know. We all have our traumas. You mentioned it beautifully earlier as well, and a friend of mine, she just gave birth. even the experience of birth for the little child already, for the baby, can be traumatic already for mother, for the father as well, of course, but also for the baby without even realizing it. Annalisa is asking, okay, how does one detect if a coding has been implemented wrongly? Someone may not even know there's a wrong coding, i.e., self-confidence issues, and they just simply don't know something is wrong with me within themselves. So how would you discover that?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. That's the first thing to know is that when I say trauma, people have a certain image in their mind. So they think, oh, of course I know what you mean. If someone screams and has panic attacks and so on, of course that's PTSD or that's trauma. But actually, a lot of trauma doesn't seem like that, and this is especially important right now. In this pandemic, because the trauma is kind of hidden. It's not that something dramatic is happening in front of you. And sometimes people they just have this really uncomfortable feeling and they can't focus their mind on things. And these are clues that there is a traumatic response going on in the back of your brain, that your brain is primed, ready to run away or to fight back, and you don't even know what it's trying to do to protect you from. So it's a kind of feeling that something is wrong. If you have that sort of feeling in the background, and it makes it difficult for you to focus, difficult for you to make decisions, difficult for you to enjoy and laugh. Those are signals of trauma. They're not just signals that it's sort of been a rough day or something. They're signals that something traumatic has happened in the brain. And remember, what's traumatic is not about what happened. The mouse, there was nothing harmful physically about it. What's traumatic is how your brain has coded it in order to try and protect you. So what I recommend you do is pay attention to the feeling sensation. If you feel constantly like something is wrong and you can't enjoy yourself and focus, that's a signal that there is something traumatic. Now, for those people who don't have immediate access to an NLP practitioner, what I'm going to recommend you do especially is go to my internet site here, and on the front page there you can download this book. It's free. It's totally free. You can get it in hard copy like this from Amazon, of course. Whatever you think about Amazon, they sell books in a lot of places. And so it's called How to Give Yourself a Hand Back Up. So you can download that free from that site, and it takes you through all of these processes. It really is like a step-by-step process to learn what I'm telling you here and how to recover from those traumatic processes too.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And maybe later on you can just WhatsApp me the link, and I'm posting it as well in the comments along that line, so people can straight away go into the session here and download it directly if you don't mind along that line. Would that be okay? Couple of more questions. We have somebody, Loon Lee is asking, mindfulness meditation is her daily practice. What does an NLP trainer does? But what can we do as a normal person? You were referring to me, you were referring to you. Not everybody can reach out to us overall. And hey, I'm more than happy to help as many people as I can here. But what can the individual do? You mentioned awareness, become aware of negative feelings within yourself. Awareness creates joys and start to get control over what's going on. These are valuable tips already. But what else can be done? Some people say also yoga most likely. Let me give you hundreds of questions instantly, okay? So Pauline is asking, in the current pandemic, what are 3 things we can do to stay sane and be more resilient? Loon Lee is asking, mindfulness meditation, is it possible? Zajid is asking, with the COVID-19 statistics increasing alarmingly, many are experiencing emotional hijacking. How can one avoid or minimize emotional amygdala hijack while trying to cope with these difficult times? Maybe they are related to each other. I'm just throwing that out on you, and let's see how you handle those without getting traumatized.
Absolutely, they are all related. And let me just home in on that first thing that you said and mentioned a couple of times after on mindfulness. So mindfulness meditation, most people are somewhere where they can learn this and they can integrate it into their own lifestyle and belief system. And you remember I said that what's going to happen in a healthy situation is that disturbing memory is going to be reinterpreted and reconsolidated into the outer area of the brain. So it's actually, we know it goes to very specific places. And how that reconsolidation happens is you need to have time when no new information is coming in, where you're not trying to solve a problem, where you're actually still and just observing. And that can happen while you're asleep, and it can happen in meditation processes as well. So mindfulness not only teaches you to take charge of your mind, but it actually creates the optimal situation for transferring these memories and reorganizing these memories. So we do actually have quite a lot of good research about how that works. I not only teach these psychology things, I teach traditional Chinese exercise and traditional Chinese meditation, Qigong processes, some of you will know that term. And so, of course, that's part of my interest as well. So yes, if you do yoga, if you do Qigong exercises, Tai Chi, those kinds of exercises, these things are designed generally to put your mind into a state where it can reconsolidate and make sense of memories. You can't do that by thinking, why did this happen and what if bad things happen? But your brain is designed to heal itself if you can give it that space to do that. So that's absolutely true. I think that kind of connected most of those things that were in those questions there, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think the main learning I have here right now is really about, first of all, creating awareness about yourself, realizing when something is going wrong from your habits that you did before. Like, for example, when you start to earlier, it was okay to interact with people. Now I'm moving away from people, and I feel a bit strange. I feel a strange feeling within myself if I see people. Then realizing what's really happening. I think you mentioned also take control over the situation you can do, even if it's small individual steps. Do those. Like, even if it's like step by step going through your day, maybe even write down what was your normal habitual day and following this routine until you train your brain up again to go back to the normal life. I like the mindfulness part or so, because I think yoga, meditation, mindfulness is very much about controlling your breathing as well. And I think breathing is a very important factor of navigating or managing emotional states as well. So how about that one? Is breathing important? I mean, breathing is always important. Always keep breathing, of course, but is breathing important to maintain your emotional states?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, breath and thought are closely connected. So if I was talking to you and suddenly I went, you would know that at that moment when I breathed in, I had a new thought. Breathing and thinking are closely coordinated. And that means that when someone is having anxiety, they are usually breathing faster than usual. And they're usually concentrating on the in-breath rather than the out-breath. And so actually learning how to breathe in a more relaxed, fluent way so that you breathe out and relax yourself. You can actually check this if you have some way of testing your pulse and your blood pressure. You can see that if you breathe in and breathe out slower than you breathe in, then within a minute or so, your pulse and your blood pressure will have dropped. So that's dramatic. So there are some physical things you can do, breathing slower as well. Another thing that you can do is to defocus your eyes. So and remember, we're talking about the way your brain has been designed to protect you. When an animal is trying to run away or fight back, it focuses its vision. So it looks at a very small part. Remember I said that people who are anxious are thinking about a very small part of the story of what happened. And they're also focused on a very small part of what they could see at that time. So if you deliberately expand out your vision so that as you look in front of you now, you can see beyond the computer in front of you, you can see, or the phone, you can see out to the sides of the room, just looking ahead. That state of expanded vision actually causes a relaxation process in the brain. That's what an animal does when it's eating and relaxing.
So it's what we in NLP actually call peripheral vision, right? Is it also helpful? And I think because not everybody knows how to do that, basically this focusing widely out. Is it also useful maybe even to, and I'm just why you respond, I looked out of the window. Is it useful to look outside and focus on a point far away? Maybe somewhere along that line?
Yeah, that's right. So to focus out, and then And then notice that as you focus on that point, you can actually you can see out to the side, so that when your hands move on the sides, you can actually see all the way around. And again, within a minute or so, your brain will start to produce this natural relaxation response.
Good. We have a couple of more questions, but I also see people dropping off our viewership right now. And we have already 1 hour. So is it still okay for you to go another 15 minutes, 20 minutes for you, Richard? Are you enjoying the session?
It's great.
Okay.
Good question. It's good questions. Yeah.
Okay, David has a longer question here. David, thank you so much for this question. He says, like, I personally think resilience could only be built through traumas. Near death and very bad experiences. For someone who never went through them or are aware of them, think it will be very tough for them to bounce back on their first bad experience. So what do you recommend them to do other than thinking about the positive side of things? For myself, I always think about the worst situation. If the worst situation is acceptable, that I'm still alive at the end of it, then my fear is naturally neutralizing. What do you think of that? If it was a long question, long statement, would love your response about this one. We got a couple of more questions coming up. So please hold on, all right? Keep asking the question. I'm trying to persuade Richard to stay on with us, okay? Okay, question first.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the first thing that David was saying is that he has a process that has worked for him. And here's something that I want to say. Regardless of what I tell you or Andreas tells you or anyone else tells you, if something is working for you, then absolutely that's what you should do. And because remember that how people get traumatized is by feeling I have no control over life. And so one of the things that's not helpful that people do when they, if someone like me comes into a situation where there's been an earthquake or a war or something, is rush in and tell people a whole lot of things to do. Do you see why? Because what that implies is, I know how to fix this, but you don't know anything. And it's disempowering. So it's actually more important for you to notice, what have I done that has actually worked, and keep doing it, and do it again. So that's absolutely the first thing. So this question about, I have a different way of thinking about this question about, is it only when you've had a deeply traumatic experience that you can be resilient? Because truthfully, that's not what the research shows. The research suggests that actually mostly traumatic experiences, if they are not handled well, and it sounds like David knows how to handle them well, but if they're not handled well, they actually make things increasingly worse each time. So we have pretty clear evidence that the people who are most distressed when there is a pandemic or when there is an earthquake or something like that are actually the people who have had trauma before. And it may be a different kind of trauma, like for example, physical violence at home. So when we're working in places like in Samoa or in Japan, we would find the people who are finding the earthquake most traumatic are people who have actually experienced domestic violence, or they've had something very traumatic in their childhood. So that doesn't always suggest that the person is going to be resilient. If they've learned from that, and I said, I've had traumatic events in my life and I feel like I've learned really useful things from them. If you've learned from that, that's great. Keep doing what you do. As for us looking at other people who have had traumatic events in the past are actually more likely to need love and support.
It makes actually sense, right? Because when I learned to cope with the environment or with whatever happens by focusing on something, I developed my own coping mechanism, right? If I now learn, when people tell me like, hey, you got to think positive, think positive, think positive. First of all, it's like self-talk talking. Okay, it does not really work always like this. But secondly, also, I would have to relearn something while inside of me already have to struggle with something very traumatic, isn't it? So do whatever works for you at that point of time is very important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And connected with that, by the way, is keep the support networks that you already have. Notice and keep the support networks that you already have. So one of the other mistakes, if I can call it a mistake, misunderstandings that people have is, I need to now find an NLP practitioner and I need to ignore my mum. And your mum, maybe she loves you. Like she's got a weird way of showing it sometimes, maybe, but she loves you. So it's really worth keeping those connections. And that's one of the things we found as well when the tsunami hit in 2004, was it in the Indian Ocean areas? Then we had a lot of Western helpers rush in. And the first thing they did that was disempowering is they said, we know how to fix this, you don't. And the second thing they did is they said, look, talk to us, don't talk to your family, because we're the experts. And then neither of those things is true. You are always the expert, and what you have been doing that works, works.
I've got my good friend Asleen. She's asking basically, do you think the emotional traumas we experience can manifest into our physical health illness if we don't deal with it?
100%. I mean, we have so much research about that, and not only to our own physical health, by the way, but we now know that we pass on those warning messages to our children if we have children after those events, and those affect them and their body as well. So that's called epigenetic transfer of information. But see, the other side of that is when you have good rest, when you love yourself and you find someone else who connects with you, when you think about useful things and feel in charge of yourself, when you do all these things we've been saying, it heals your body. It doesn't just heal your thinking, it heals your body. It sends a message to all your immune cells. They go around your body and they understand that as you love them, as you love life, they will look after you. So you change yourself, and then that is transmitted to future generations as well.
This is excellent. This is excellent stuff. I think all of you should give Richard some big virtual hugs, likes, support, love, insights, whatever you can give here right now, so he feels like appreciated for being here, spending his evening with us here, because on his side is already a little bit later along that line. So thank you for this answer. If there's no other question here from the audience right now, hey, hang on in the audience. I want to give you a little bit of a link afterwards for something that might be useful to some of you, a free online course if you want. Some of you know it already, but I think it's worth you are holding on to this one, so I want to give something to you as well. Let me blend in as well where you can connect with Richard. Let me just play that along as well. And I want to ask Richard a couple of quick questions along that line, okay? Coming to the end right now, some quick interview questions, all right? So just some fun stuff to get people out of that hardcore thinking about traumatic experiences, all right? You trained across the world, Richard. You traveled across the world. What was your favorite place to train? And you have to start with Malaysia, but you have to say, aside of Malaysia, or aside of from Malaysia, I like to train. So I give you that one as a response start.
Well, there are things that I love in each place where I train. Honestly, it's not that there's one place where it's better to train. It's that what I'm always interested in doing when I come to a place is looking for, what do I love most of all about this place? And sometimes it will be the playfulness of the people. Sometimes it will be like I was talking to Andreas before about the difference between Germany and Malaysia, for example. You know, in Germany, the wonderful thing is everything is organized. You know, a year ahead of the training, it's organized.
That's why I'm here.
And on the other hand, in Malaysia, you know, here's the wonderful thing is that people are more relaxed, people are more friendly. They actually are. You know, they're more warm. And that is a resilient characteristic, by the way. That's an important thing, is that cultures differ in terms of how much love and support they are naturally giving. So yeah, so there are things that I love in each of those places where I teach. There are some foods I like more than others. So I know you were asking about that.
Okay, next question is, yes. Oh yeah, when you were in Malaysia, when were you in Malaysia? There was a couple of years ago, I think.
Well, it must have been at least 2 years ago now. So I think it was about 3 years ago, yeah. I was teaching.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
Okay, well, it's the kind of food that you can get in Malaysia. Absolutely, I really love curry of any kind. I'm vegetarian, so
I think all Malaysians love you now.
Yeah, Indian food has lots and lots of choices for me, and Malaysia is a place where I can easily get yummy food.
All right, cool. And where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
You know, you know what's happening in the world right now. Where I want to be is traveling to new places, teaching these things in new places. So I have I have this ever expanding group of people who've trained with me, who teach other people these things, and that's really precious to me. And knowing that I'm going to go out and connect with other people and pass on these skills, as you can see, like we'll make these available, this book available to people, we'll make connections available to people, because this is what we're here for. This is what we're on this planet for, is to look after each other.
That's
and
awesome.
can I just come back to thanking you for organizing this, Andreas, because it takes a lot of organization to make this happen with all of these people here, and this is precious. This is absolutely what we need in the world right now.
Awesome. So how can people, what are the 3 points you would tell people if they were to meet you here right now about the crisis right now, or about life? 3 things.
So the first thing is, there is a bigger picture, and the learnings about this will be like, in 10 years' time, imagine how you're going to look back on this and understand that you went through this dramatic experience. And all people who went through this experience will then be able to say, we are the generation who really know. We know what's important. We know how important it is to connect. And you'll be trying to explain that to your kids. Oh, you don't understand why we had time when we couldn't even go out and hug someone, So that's the big picture. And the next thing is to find little things that you can do, and little things that you're in charge of, including reminding yourself of all those good little things that you've done before. And the other thing, I guess, is to let go of those questions about why and what if bad things happen, and just instead think, what can I do? And that would include, of course, what can I do connecting with other human beings.
Any last words before we are starting to wrap up? Please hold on a little while. I got to share something with you guys. Okay, any last words from your side first before I start focusing on me initially again?
Well, let me just very briefly tell you about someone else that I met right at the start there in Sarajevo. I met a woman, and what had happened was there had been a bomb landed there, and it didn't explode. And so she got the bomb squad people to check this thing, and what they found is that one of the Serb militia who was attacking the city of Sarajevo had broken the firing pin that causes this bomb to explode. He had spent perhaps hours secretly bending it backwards and forwards until the mechanism broke so it would not kill anyone. And suddenly she was shocked. She realized she had hated these people who were firing at her, these Serbs, and that anger had sustained her through this war, and she realized now one of them had saved her life. She went home and she thought about that, and she decided that, there's only one thing that made sense for her, and that is to feel love and gratitude to every Serb that she ever met for the rest of her life, because she knew she would meet that person. She'd walk past him on the street someday. The war would be over. That's the big picture. And he wouldn't have a sign saying, hey, I broke some firing pins, so if your life was saved, do come over and say hello. He's not going to tell her that. But at some point she would see him. She would know he was Serb. They wear slightly different clothing. And she realized she couldn't bear the thought that she would look angrily at this man who had risked his own life to save hers. So she made this decision. I will feel love and gratitude every time I see a Serb for the rest of my life. That's the only thing I can do. Now, that woman came out of that war better than before. That doesn't mean she was glad that the war happened, but she learned something from that we could learn right now from this. And that is, you don't know what I was going to say in this very thing here. You don't know what's going to happen as a result of you thinking about what we did here today. You never know when something is going to transform your life in a powerfully positive way. And since you don't know what someone is going to do with you, the only thing that makes sense whenever you see anyone, not just Serb, not just New Zealander, but anyone, is to feel love and gratitude for this human being here in front of you.
Wow, that is actually beautiful. Love and gratitude. Many people in Facebook write about love and gratitude, but it's really, really, really important stuff. I have to also slowly wrap up. Let me see if I get all of it nicely done. Yes, okay, yes. Richard, please. In next month, we are going to talk to somebody else, and I want to announce it at a later stage, who is like doing his NLP practitioner training